Good evening. I'm Dawn O'Boyle, from the village historian of Rouses Point. I'd like to thank the Hometown Cable and the Champlain New Channels for giving us the opportunity to present these programs to you. If you would like to be on this show, which will be held possibly in Sunday evenings, or if you know anyone in this area that would be interested in joining us, please contact myself or Joyce Lavoie, Lennon Ellie Martinson, Bob Fitzgerald. We're all members of the Village History Council. And once again, thank you for your interest. All right?
Hello, I'm Joyce Lavoie, and I'd like to welcome you to another segment of the Oral History Project of the Village History Council. The goal of the program is to invite residents of Rouses Point, Champlain, Moore, Chazy to share with us their recollection and memories of their village many years ago. I'm sure that in this segment we'll hear many interesting things about Champlain. We're going to be visiting tonight with Mr. Aurel Parsons, the mayor of the village of Champlain. I'm very happy that you're able to be here with us.
Thank you.
And we're anxious to hear about Champlain and some of the events that have taken place here.
Well, to begin with, in 1932, my father told me when we were living in the city of Dover, New Jersey, of about 50,000 people, that we were going to be moving to a small village in upper New York State. I wasn't too enthused about it, coming to a small village and living into a city. We pulled up here in April the 7th of 1932. I sat in the back porch of our house, which we are living in now, and was looking down at the dumps. My dad came out and said, "Aurel, why don't you take a walk downtown and see what the village is like?" So I took off and went from one end of the village to the other. And to me, I think it was the most beautiful village I'd ever seen in my life. The elm trees formed a canopy across the roads. Every store in the village, and there were a lot of them at that time, were busy. People were coming and going. When I came back to the house, Dad said, "Well, what did you think about the village after coming from the city?" And the big thing that impressed me, I think the most important thing, was being able to walk in grass. The only time that I had walked in grass in the city was when we would go to a park. We lived in an apartment house and had no grass at all. So that was the beginning of it. In a lot of the history that I recollect comes from Hugh McClellan, Woodbury, and Malcolm McClellan. I used to spend hours after hours down at the Morsefield Press and listen to tales, and used to go to the house. They lived right next to us, and we used to go to the house in the evenings, and they would talk to us about the history of Champlain.
They knew a lot about Champlain.
Yes, they did. They had pictures and history of this whole community right from the beginning. What I'm going to speak about now is what I remember from 1932 on, and the first thing that I think about is the fire department. That made a big impression on me. I had never seen a fire truck of that caliber. It was drawn by the men. It would take 12 men on each side, and they would pump. Throughout the village, I think there was 4 what they call small fire stations, where they had hose carts. And as soon as the whistle would blow, they would turn around, and a certain group of men would go to each one of the hose cart buildings, pull out the hoses. Another group of men would pull the fire truck to the scene of the fire. A little later on, they would tow it behind a truck. We first got our fire truck, mechanical truck. I can remember all of us kids going down to the fire station and saying, "My gosh, isn't this a wonderful thing?" I remember going to fires as a kid on our bicycles. As soon as the whistle would blow, we would turn around and get on our bicycles and take off for the fire. And we could always hear the fire truck because of the loud backfiring. And we'd always look in the side fenders, and there was Harold Coonan, the mechanic, working on the fire truck to get the fire truck to the scene of the fire. There sure has been a lot of improvement since then. One of the biggest things I think that in my life anyway, when I came to Champlain, was every evening we would hear the whistle of the train in Perry's Mills. And that was a sign for all of us to turn around and run as fast as we could to the railroad station and watch the evening train come in and take off. You could get onto a train in Champlain and end up in New York City. And that was one of the big thrills of our life, was running to the railroad station. It would be anywhere from 25 to 30 kids that would always come up to the railroad station at night. If you were lucky, and I was one of the lucky ones, I would ride to the railroad station with Mr. Hicks, who was a mail carrier, and his horse and buggy, and we'd go up and pick up one sack of mail. And believe me, of a boy of 12 years old sitting onto a wagon driven by a horse, pulled by a horse, and carrying the mail was a big deal. Believe me. I would always sit up very, very straight, and I thought I was really a big deal watching the other kids watch me. Coming to the history of Champlain, I think of the custom house, which was on Elm Street, right across the street from our house. And that was during probation time. I used to go up the top floor of our house and look out of our windows. There was a dirt road leading to the new custom house of today. And you could always tell when a bootlegger was going through because of the cloud of dust. A few moments later, you'd see another cloud of dust, and you knew the troopers were after him. We used to sit on the front porch and watch the people come through the custom house. And we had it was shrubbery between our house and the next house, and it was probably 4 foot deep and very thick shrubbery. And I can remember one night walking around, and some bootleggers, and I don't know who they were, had unloaded their sacks of booze into the hedge, went down to the custom house, reported in, and came back and picked up the booze and took off with it. And you didn't dare say anything. The one thing of Champlain is, I think that every village has one, was a man by the name of Bill Earl, who took care of boats. He had a tugboat and he had a barge, and I can remember going over with Bill over to Isle of Man, I think it was, and we'd get a load of sand for Sheridan Iron Works on a Sunday afternoon. There'd probably be 25, 30 kids that would go over, and we'd shovel the sand into the barge for Bill. He was telling me that there used to be a barge factory on, it would be on River Street. It was a little bit further up from Bill, where they made barges. There was also a creamery, a cheese factory, and a grist mill on River Street. On the way going to Perry's Mills, on the left-hand side of the road before our water reservoir, was a paper factory. And I have a roll of the paper from that factory. It was very, very thin. It was almost like a parchment. Of course, now at the age, you just touch it and it just crumbles. On Oak Street, there was a tannery that operated for years behind Mrs. Gagno's house, Alfred Gagno's house. The island, well, it was islands. There were 2 islands behind the stores on Main Street. And I can remember Malcolm showing me pictures at night where it was lit up, where they had bridges and they had band pavilion, and showed the people and women in their old clothes and their, well, what we call old-fashioned clothes, the high bonnets and the high shoes, and the men with their celluloid collars, going over across the bridge, going over for the band concerts. Of course, the buttons are still there for the bridges, but the dams, a lot of the dams broke, and we got high ice, and it started tearing up the island, so it was never restored. The village has talked about it, and Mr. Agor, one of our trustees, is talking about trying to restore some of the island. And it was, most people say island, but there were actually two islands. It was divided in the middle, and there was a big muskie that used to be between the two islands. And if you took a rowboat and went very, very slow, you could always see him. He looked like the size of a log. And he stayed there for years. I don't know whatever happened to him, but I can remember as a kid, we'd always go up and say, "You want to see the muskie?" Anybody came over to see, "You want to see the muskie?" We'd get in a rowboat and we'd row up and take a look at the muskie in the river.
And these islands, they were located in back of what used to be Pearl's department
Yes.
store, along in there?
Yes. And they were well kept. Of course, it's been years now since they've done anything. We did clean the island up at one time. We had the Boy Scouts use it as a project to clean it up. But now we are talking about trying to restore the island as much as we possibly can. The stores in the village, I can remember the stores in the village, my gosh, starting right from the corner of Main Street to the bridge on Route 9 on across Main Street. There was one building after another. On the south side of the street was another business section which burnt in 1966. It was a cold January day when the fire started in Kaufman's basement. And when it finally we were able to put it out, the whole side of the street was completely destroyed. It was never restored. And so the village got it as a park. Of course, every village and every city, I guess now, the Main Street is a thing of the past, except Rouses Point. And Rouses Point, I admire them because they are still trying to keep their village. Most of them are moved out with the new malls. Everybody is moving out of the villages. So our village has lost a lot of stores. A lot of them were torn down because of we lost Pearl's store because of a new roof that they were going to be putting on, and they never got to put it on, so we had to destroy two of the oldest buildings in our village. Across the street, my gosh, there was all kinds of stores. Most of them either fell in or were destroyed by fire. On the north side, the Bayshard block was where Antill's garage is now. That burnt in 47. I can remember as a kid working for Mr. Gardner's ice house, bringing ice up to the top of that building, up to the people at the top of the building. And that burnt in 1947. Another fire that we had, which of course doesn't help your village out because it just kept burning, was our high school, which was located on Prospect Street and Elm Street. And I went to that school. That burnt in 1944, I think it was, 45, somewhere along in there. And it burnt a very short period of time. I can remember when going to school there that the top floor of the building was condemned at that time. So it didn't take long for the building to be engulfed completely in flames and to be burnt down.
Right.
One of the other landmarks was St. Mary's Academy, with the convent in the front of the academy, which was a boarding school. And I attended that school at that time. There was only one small stone building at the time that was in front. Then they added in 1959, they added on the rest of St. Mary's Academy. But that was started in 1906, has been running ever since.
Right.
As far as the industry in the village, most people, I can remember working in the Grand Union, and people would bring in eggs in buckets, and we would count the eggs out, and then we would give them credit towards their groceries. And Saturday night, the stores would be open until midnight, with people coming and going at all times. And you look at it now, and you say to yourself, I wonder if we're actually going ahead or if we're going backwards.
Yes, I remember on Saturday night that used to be quite an event. Everybody went downtown.
All the women went shopping, and the men went over to the hotels and had a beer, and then they'd meet, and it was nothing to see 4 or 5 horse-drawn buggies downtown, along with the automobiles.
Mm-hmm.
I think of what we used to call the dummy in the middle of the main street. It was a flashing light built up in cement, and I think just about everybody in town hit that one time or another. There was always chips onto it. I don't know whatever happened to it. It just disappeared. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it had been there for a good many years. I can remember when the 2 bridges, the one on Elm Street and the one on Route 9, were replaced. One in 1932 on Elm Street. It used to be an old iron bridge. We as kids used to think it was a big deal to get up and crawl up on the top of the bridge and sit there watching the cars and the buggies go by. And it doesn't seem that it's so long ago, 1932, that you would find such a big change. Now if you see a horse and a buggy go through, you say, my gosh, what's going on?
Yeah.
But in those days, and it doesn't seem that far away, that there was so many horse and buggies. As far as the rebuilding of Champlain, trying to rebuild the village of Champlain, we are in the process of putting in a new water system and a secondary sewer system. Our development area is got one client now. They're building a $1 million building. So we're starting to rebuild and see the light a little bit in comparison to what we did have.
So that's encouraging to the...
Yes, it is. It's very encouraging to the people here after losing their main industry. Sheridan was a family-owned affair, and for years and years and years, you worked there, your father worked there before you, and you just followed your father's steps. Then it was bought out and became bigger, and I guess the bigger you are, then it's just a number. It's not a family anymore. Some of the people, the Morsefield Press, I've had some people ask me about the Morsefield Press, was in the bottom of what is now the Knights of Columbus. It used to be the Lyceum Theater, and you could go to a movie on a Saturday night or a Sunday night for 10 cents and see a good movie. The Morsefield Press was in the bottom of the Lyceum Theater, and I believe that they did all of the work for Sheridan Ironworks, which was a lot of work, plus all of the work that they did for the village and for the county. Mr. Hugh McCollin and Woodbury kept a record of all the cemeteries and of all the history of Champlain. When Woodbury became sick, I as mayor had spoken to Woodbury a good many times about giving the village of Champlain a lot of the records and a lot of the pictures of the village so that we could keep it here. But upon his death, A lot of it was sent to a museum in Plattsburgh and also a museum in Albany. So we have very little as far as pictures. I can remember him showing me pictures of the village of Champlain where we had gravelled roads and wood sidewalks. That was a big improvement. I remember Hugh McCollum telling me that one of the biggest things was the day that they finally finished all the sidewalks in the village, which were wood. And a lot of the piping in the village was wood pipe. I have a piece of it at home from Malcolm that gave me a piece of pipe. And I think the pipe are actually made out of wood, and they use it here in the village. Are there any other questions or any questions that you would like to ask me as far as the history of Champlain is concerned?
Well, no, I think you pretty well covered it. I have heard about the dry lake. Now,
The dry lake, that was at the top of Prospect Street. Up until probably 1960, that was still called a dry lake. Every spring of the year, the snow, and this was located behind St. Mary's Cemetery on Prospect Street. It was a gully that would fill up with water anywhere from 5 to 6 feet deep. In the fall of the year, it would get, maybe down to 2-3 inches. But I can remember fighting a fire at Russell Hutchison's father, who lived where Bill Stevenson is today, and we drew water from the dry lake. It hasn't been, we haven't seen as much water up there for some reason or other as we used to. But as a kid, I can remember we used to take and build homemade boats, and we'd turn around and go across and paddle across the dry lake. We thought that was a big deal, going across the dry lake.
so there's quite a bit of history connected with your home, where you live.
Yes, the house was built in 1918 after the fire of 1912, which burnt, about 3/4 of the village of Champlain and all surrounding houses. The house is built exactly the same as what the original house was built in 1805. There are rooms in the house. There are 4 rooms in the house, which you wouldn't know is there unless you happen to be looking for, where they kept the carpetbaggers during the Civil War. And I can remember when we first moved up there, my brothers and I found these little doors, and we walked inside and crawled on our hands and knees, and we came into a room. And we knocked in the wall, and my father was trying to find us. He couldn't find out where we were coming from, but he could hear us, but he couldn't see us. But there are four rooms, 2 on the front part of the house and 2 in the back part of the house. It's exactly the same as what they had during the carpetbagger.
That's interesting.
The first house was constructed of wood, the same as this one, and it was put up for $100 and 2 barrels of rum. And Mr. McCollum always used to laugh, and he'd always say, he said, the house was put up by a couple of drunken carpenters.
But they did a pretty good job, despite.
Yes, they did. Everything was hand cut. And today, you go, if something, a piece of the molding or anything in the house, if we have to get another piece, the only place that we can get it is in Montreal. There's a company there that will make it for us. But you just can't get it anywhere. The old fancy moldings.
Well, not only is the art perhaps lost, the craft itself.
Yes.
It would be costly for a person to do that.
Yes, it would be today.
At the price of the labor. What about the Savoy Hotel? Now that was an old.
Savoy Hotel was probably the ritziest hotel in this part of the area. I can remember as a kid, Mr. Thompson owned the hotel, and it was strictly by reservation. They rented rooms out for the summer. In the front yard, they had chairs with tables and large colored umbrellas. And I can remember the people from New York coming up and going to the Savoy Hotel, which was a very prominent place at that time. The I think of the bus that they had that used to go from Champlain to Plattsburgh, run by Mr. Narrow when I was a young boy. It was a small bus. He would make 3 trips to Plattsburgh per day. He'd go down through Chazy, West Chazy, Beekman Town, and into Plattsburgh and back. And I think at that time that it was 40 cents for a round-trip ticket to go from Champlain to Plattsburgh. You could get down at a certain time in the morning and do what business you had and come back in the afternoon. And that went on for years and years until buses came in and cars. Everybody had a car, and so he just went out of business.
That bus was probably used to meet people and coming in to stay at the hotel?
Yes, and a lot of it, they used to deliver a lot of packages. I remember that, my gosh, he used to deliver a lot of packages from Plattsburgh up in this area.
I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Parsons.
Well, you're
I've
quite
enjoyed
welcome.
this very much. And thank everyone for watching this evening. I ran